Well, good Monday morning to you, everyone. Welcome to my morning musings. My name is Don K. Preston of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I am currently sharing some thoughts on the issue of life after death. Some detractors of covenant eschatology claim, well, if the Lord came in AD 70, then this life is simply all that there is. We don't have any hope of heaven. As I've stated in the earlier segments of this, it really amazes me how illogical and how desperate some people get in their claims, in their, quote, argumentation against covenant eschatology. Some of the objections clearly are not well thought out at all. It's almost like the proverbial statement, just throw some mud out there and you hope something sticks. So anyway, one of my favorite texts, really, is John chapter 11. You remember Lazarus, the good friend of Jesus, has died. And Jesus waits 4 days to go visit Mary and Martha, his sisters. And his disciples are somewhat chagrined and puzzled, to say the very least. And finally he arrives, and Jesus at that scene makes some incredible but wonderful statements. Of course, most of the time Jesus' statements are misunderstood, even at this time. But notice what Jesus said. I am the resurrection and the life. Now watch this. The one who believes on me, though he may die, he shall live. Now, the context is not a context of honor and shame, honor versus shame. It's not one of defeat versus vindication. It's not one of persecution versus vindication. The context is life and death. And Jesus said, if a man believes in me, even if he dies, he will live. Now notice that Jesus doesn't say one single thing about he'll come up out of a physical hole in the ground. What he simply affirms is that the person who believes in him and who dies will live. Now watch. And by the way, it makes it rather difficult to make what Jesus is about to say have anything to do with biological life. Because he said, and whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Really. It's amazing to me how commentators want to talk about physical life and physical death, or physical resurrection in John 11. But all of a sudden, in John 11:26, they want to abandon that. You can't abandon the context that you've already established if your principle is true. Jesus clearly cannot be talking about physical life, physical death. If a man believes in me, he shall never die. It's kind of like John 8:51, isn't it? Where Jesus said, if a man keeps my commandments, he will never die. Undeniably, irrefutably, Jesus cannot be speaking of physical life, because every person who has ever lived from the moment Jesus uttered these words down to the present moment either has died biologically or will die biologically. There is some kind of life, some kind of death that Jesus is talking about that is not biological life and death. The one who believes in me will never die. But of course, he had just said, if a man does die, he will live. Does Jesus give us two different looks at what he's talking about? Yes, he does. The promise is, if we die, we will live. The promise is, if we believe, we will never die. You really, really cannot make Jesus' promise of never dying biological. Has he discussed it in the text? Of course he has. But this promise doesn't fit that, does it? And his promise that if we do die biologically, we will live, doesn't mean, he hasn't said that we will live biologically. It means that after we die, we will live if we believe in him. See, it's an incredible text that cannot allow kind of a single-eyed approach to it. But when analyzed carefully, when analyzed contextually, it contains an undeniable promise of life after death. And for those who believe in him, see, that's believing in him now. The reception of life that the physical death cannot destroy, cannot interrupt. It simply teaches that the life that we receive through faith in Christ transcends physical death. That physical death does not end, cannot end that life. It is life we receive now, a life that continues after we die physically. Wow. What a wonderful promise. Hey, thanks for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. We appreciate it so very, very much. Hey, don't forget, in about 2 weeks, I'm going to be in Virginia Beach to be speaking there on how should we then live. Now that the Lord has come, what is life in the kingdom to be like? You don't want to miss these lectures. I look forward to seeing some of you there. God bless. Thanks again for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. We'll see you on the flip side.